Today we are making coats for Galgos, which are Spanish Greyhounds. We're going to learn how to draft the pattern based on the measurement of the dog. I don't have a Galgo handy, but I do have Ripley, so we will be measuring her today. I'll show you how to draft your pattern, I'll show you how to cut your pattern, and I'll show you how to put your pattern together. I will be using both a serger and a traditional sewing machine today, but you can use just a regular old sewing machine if you don't have a serger. All right, let's get started. Before we draft our pattern, let's talk about the materials that you'll need for this project. You're going to need about a yard or so, depending on the size of your dog, of the outer shell. I'm using a flannel for this project, and then you're going to need a lining as well, so I'm using fleece for the lining. You're also going to need a measuring tape or a ruler. I definitely prefer a longer measuring tape, just so that I'm not limited there. You're also going to need a good pair of scissors to cut your paper. And then another good pair of scissors to cut your fabric. You'll also need a roll of butcher paper. And I definitely suggest getting a fabric marker that is water or air soluble like this one so that you can mark where things are going to go. It's going to end up being 4 pieces that we cut. So we're going to cut the belly band, the outside, then the belly band on the inside, and then a lining, and then the outside shell. So it's going to be 4 pieces total going into this. You'll also need some Velcro to attach the strap to, and I don't think it would hurt to have a dressmaker's ruler as well so that you can sort of see how wide you want your strap to be. So let's get Ripley's measurements and make her a coat. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to measure our dog and get the basic measurements for the coat. You're going to want to take a couple of different measurements, most notably the length from her shoulder blades to the base of her tail. You're also going to want to take the full girth around her chest, or the widest part of her chest. We're also going to take the radius around her neck. We're going to take the width of her chest here as well. And we're also going to take the length from the bottom of her belly up to the side, right about where we want that strap to be. So since she's lying down on her side, I'm going to go ahead and take her girth. I'm going to measure from the widest part of her belly up to her spine. That's right at 16 inches for Ripley. I'm also going to measure the length of her spine so that I can get a good measurement there. We're going to start right between her shoulder blades here and measure all the way down to the base of her tail. And that's 25 inches for Ripley. And then I'm going to go around her neck so I know how big to make the neck hole. And I'm going to give her a little bit of space here. So that's going to be 18 inches for her. And then the last measurement we're going to do is go from shoulder blade to shoulder blade across her chest. And that's 15 inches for Ripley. So 5 measurements down, and she's good to go until we need to fit her garment on her. Ripley's actually really good about fitting her garments because she just sort of stands there. But I understand that sometimes dogs are a little wiggly. It doesn't have to be a perfect fit. The main thing is we want to make sure that the dog is being kept warm.
Okay, so just to give you an idea of how we will be using the measurements that we just took, this is what the final pattern looks like. You are going to be cutting this on the fold, so it looks like it's just one side of the coat. But we do have a few measurements to take into consideration that we just took. So the back is going to be the full length of the back. It's going to end right at her shoulder blades. Then you're going to have a neck measurement, and it's basically going to be a gradual curve down to where you measured her chest. This is going to vary dog by dog because some dogs have deeper chests, some dogs have longer backs. So it really just needs to be one of those things that you sort of try this on your dog and make sure that it fits her properly. I also am going to do a chest length here of about 7 inches. That's pretty standard for most dogs of this size, but again, just make sure that you're checking for the fit, and you can fit your pattern on your dog, just sort of like lay it over and eyeball it and make sure that it's looking okay. I also took her chest width here, so this is going to be half of that measurement that we just took because we measured from shoulder to shoulder, which means we measured both sides. So we're going to want to do just half of that. So in Ripley's case, that's going to be 7.5 inches. We also want to make sure that we're going to do it big enough for her girth, and then we're going to just sort of curve it back up to her tail. And again, this is one of those things you just sort of cut to fit. So make sure you have a lot of butcher paper because it might take you a couple of times to get it right. I'm going to go ahead and start by doing the longest measurement, which is her back. And Ripley's back was right at 25 inches. And unfortunately, this is just an 18-inch ruler. So I'm going to draw 18 inches. Whoops. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And then add on to that 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So that will fit Ripley's back. I'm going to do her girth now, and I want it to be able to come down but still have a little bit of space. So if you took the full round part of your dog, like all the way around, you're going to want to divide that by 2 so that you just have the one side. And then I take off 3 inches. So it's going to take an inch and a half off of either side, so the coat doesn't overlap underneath, which could cause chafing, especially for a dog like Ripley, who she kind of like slides down when she sits, so she's already kind of rubbed that fur off of her belly. So I want to make this as comfortable as I can. So her measurement for one side was 16 inches, which is here, but I'm going to take off an inch and a half, so it'll be 3 inches total, an inch and a half for both sides. So that's going to be 1 and then 2. So right about there is where I want that to go. So we have my girth here. So about there, just so that I know where that's going to start. And then 7.5 here. That's going to be the deepness of her chest. Like so. And then another 7 inches up, because that's standard for the front of a coat for the dog of this size. And of course you can shorten it or lengthen it however much. I'm just going to do a gradual freehand curve here. Just like that. And then I want this to come back just a little bit. The fullest part of her is about here at about 9 inches. And I'll try this on her in a minute to make sure that it fits. Some coats like to come up and then come back down. So that'll help you just sort of draw a gradual little curve here. And then I'm going to draw a gradual curve up. It kind of looks like a saddle to me. I'm going to go ahead and mark my bias, which is going to be the length of the fold. Cut on fold. And this is for Ripley. And then I will cut this out and kind of try it on her, see where it's fitting kind of tight versus not so tight, and adjust the pattern until I get it exactly where I want it. And then I'm going to cut my outer fabric, just like that. And I'm also going to cut my lining fabric, and it's the same pattern. You're literally going to lay them on top of each other and sew them together. And then I'm also going to decide how long I want my piece. The way you decide this is you go based on how far up you measured on your dog. So for Ripley, it was 7 inches. You're going to have 2 sides of the coat, so that's 14 inches. And then we took out 3 inches underneath, but I'm going to add a little bit more room underneath. So maybe like 4 or 5 inches instead of the 3 that we took out on the coat. And that'll give you the length of your strap. For the Galgo strap, since they're a little bit skinnier, I did 18 inches long by 3 inches wide. And I cut out the lining for that, and I also cut out the shell. So I will actually sew them together, right sides together, and leave one end open and then flip it out. But I'll show you that in just a second, because the strap is actually the first part of this whole thing. And then while I'm here at the cutting table, I'm also going to cut a couple of pieces of Velcro. I'm going to cut one hook side and one loop side for the strap, because they'll come together. And then I'm gonna keep a long piece for the front and another long piece so that the fronts can come together also. And that's it for cutting. That's all you have to do. So now we're gonna head to the sewing machine. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to be using a serger, but you can absolutely use just a regular old run-of-the-mill sewing machine. This is just easier for me because I don't have to spend time clipping my stuff when I get it all stitched together. So I'm gonna start by stitching together the belly band, and you're gonna wanna put your fabric right sides together. We're gonna sew down the long side, and then down a short side, and then down a long side again, and leaving this side open so that we can flip it out and then attach it to the coat. So let me just go ahead and get this serged together. I've done a seam allowance of 1/2 inch here, and I added that to my pattern before I cut the fabric. So when you are drafting your pattern, you are going to want to make sure that you're adding some sort of seam allowance, because when you push it through your machine, it's going to eat up a little bit. So standard seam allowance for home sewing is about 5/8 of an inch. Sometimes I do 1/4 of an inch when I'm doing the Galgo coats, but this time I did 1/2 inch. So I'm just gonna line my edge up with the 1/2 inch marker on my machine, and then I'm gonna start stitching. I'm just trimming up my loose ends. Don't like loose ends. If you're sewing this on a regular sewing machine, you might want to go ahead and clip your corners just so that when you turn it inside out, you don't have any bulk in that corner. And I'm just going to turn it. While you're at it, just go ahead and clip these corners too, even though you haven't sewn them yet, because we're going to turn this side under about 1/4 of an inch so that it hides that raw edge. And then you need to press this down so it's nice and flat. So let me go do that, and I'll be right back. Alright, so now that I have that pressed, I'm going to go ahead and stitch it to my coat. I'm just going to go ahead and measure up. So since this is for my Galgo, I'm going to go ahead and do these final measurements. So I lost about 1 inch during all of that, which is fine. 17 inches. So I'm going to put it right up, maybe like 4 inches up. And my serger doesn't want me to measure. And I tend to put it like at the smallest point of this curve here. Not scientific at all, just sort of eyeballing things, trying to match up the plaids as best I can. That's right at 4. You're going to want to go ahead and turn this under. And since we have our corners clips, it's going to lay nice and flat. So that'll be even on the other side. A good thing to sort of have for this sort of project, especially if you're sewing together a good bit of fabric, such as the fleece, is a walking foot. And the reason why is because the walking foot allows for top feeder dogs to be working alongside the feeder dogs that are going through the bottom. So there's something constantly grabbing the fabric, which makes really silky fabrics a little bit easier to sew, and fabrics like this get to stay put together. So I'm going to slide this underneath right to the edge of my foot. I'm going to let it down, and as you can see, it didn't come down very far because there's a lot of fabric wadded up under here. So I'm going to do a couple of stitches, and then I'm going to back stitch and then start stitching through. Hopping over that pin just as pretty as you please. And you'll notice I'm not having to put forth much effort in guiding the fabric through because the feeder dogs on the top and the bottom are pulling it through, which is really nice. I'm going to get it right there and then walk my needle forward one more stitch to where it's embedded in my fabric. And then I'm going to lift my foot up and flip my fabric around like this, so it can sew in this direction. And I'm pulling this pin out, letting my my foot down, and sewing, making sure I get that flipped under edge so that it stays down as well. Walk it forward one more time to where it's down, let up my foot, and swerve it around one more time. Make sure your fabric on this side is nice and straight. Let down your foot again, and here we go for the end. Now, one thing I will say is you're going to want to leave a little bit of room down here at the bottom, which of course I didn't, because when you start sewing your two pieces together, you're going to need your seam allowance down here to feed through your machine. So make sure you leave yourself a little bit of room so that you don't stitch this belly band through so that it's on the wrong side. We're going to want to kind of flip it this way and stitch and then flip it down so that it stays on the outside. If your fabric bunches, just pause for a second, unbunch it, and go again. I'm going to stop about right there and pull it out. And trim it. Make sure you trim the back side too. Trim this, pull out your pins. And for me, I'm going to have to take out a couple of these stitches so that I have some room to stitch the back side to the front side. All right, that should be enough. So now we're going to pin these sides together, right sides together, so it's going to look odd because we're going to be working on this side of the fabric and pinning it to the fleece, and then stitching all the way around except for one little spot in the back so that we can flip it out, and then we'll slip stitch it. All right, so I've got our coat pinned, and I want to do this in one continuous stitch. I don't want to have to pull it out and restart or anything like that. So I've pinned it so that I can just sort of start from the back and then go all the way around to the other side. I'm going to leave this back part open so I can pull it through. As you can tell, I have the right sides together, so the wrong sides are out. And then I'm going to slip stitch the back of this. So I'm going to just lift up my foot on my serger. And again, you don't have to have a serger for this. A regular sewing machine works just fine. This is just saving me some time so that I don't have to go around and clip the edges before I turn it out, so there won't be bulk underneath. But you can totally use a regular sewing machine. No big deal. this is the side you're really going to start feeling it. It's going to be down here at the bottom again. So this is actually the part where it is sewn on. So I'm just going to be really careful. There's about 1/4 of an inch here of unsewn fabric that I can sew. So I'm just going to be real careful. Here comes the curve. I'm actually going to swerve it. If you can see it, but there's definitely some bulk here, and I marked it with a pen. I'm kind of feeling around with my fingers just to see where it is and make sure that it's not going to interfere with my needles up there. I'm taking it nice and slow. So far I haven't sewn through it, so I consider that a success. I'm going to pull that pen out, kind of feel around for it again. So there's that corner that we just sewed on there. So this is going to be there's the belly band right there. So I'm just going to make sure everything's lying flat. Make sure my fabric's still together since I took that pin out. And carefully sew through it. And we're out of the woods. So let's keep going. I'm just going to sew off the edge here. Just like that. And clip it, because we're going to leave this part open so we can pull it through. That's what we trimmed off. So if you're using a normal sewing machine, you can expect to trim off quite a bit of fabric so that there's no bulk. So our pieces are sewn together. I'm going to stick my hand through the back here and go all the way up to the front and just start pulling it through. And I just remembered I did not clip my corners, but I don't think it will hurt in the long run. Once you get it flipped right side out, go back up to that front and just sort of use your fingers to push those corners out. It's looking really good. And the other side, same sort of deal. Making sure to push those corners through. That one looks a little weak. I might have to stitch that back on. And as you can see, we did not stitch our belly band into our hem. So we actually came through, so it's right there on that hem, and it looks pretty fabulous. Go ahead and grab your Velcro, and this Velcro is super easy because this is actually sticky on the back. I have been stitching them on as well as sticking them, but you really don't have to. It's good for up to 10 pounds of pressure. So I'm just gonna feel around through the fabric to see where the other end of the belly band is so that they're nice and even. And then I'm going to peel off the back of my Velcro. It's very, very, very sticky. I actually sewed through, I've already made a coat like this, and I sewed through the Velcro after I stuck it on here. I'm actually going to let it come down a little bit. And it actually gunked up my needle. I'm going to trim it down just a tad. You can cut it with regular old fabric scissors, nothing fancy. And then to ensure that A, I stick the right side on here, and B, it lines up like it's supposed to, I'm actually going to stick the Velcro together. Go ahead and trim it while I have it on here so that it lines up. And then I'm going to peel off the backing. You can definitely get sew through Velcro if you feel you need it. And then just stick it on there. And the package says to let this sit for 24 hours before you start trying to use it. So let it sit for 24 hours before you try to use it. And then the last little bit we have to do, other than a straight stitch at the back to close up that opening, is to put Velcro on the front. So once you have it stitched, it'll make a lot more sense where you're going to put this Velcro, because you're going to want to put a strip on this side, which is the front, but it's going to overlap like this, right? So you're going to want to put the other side on that side. So let's go ahead and unstick this Velcro. Come on, Velcro. Sometimes it's really difficult to get a corner started because it is very sticky. It's like industrial strength Velcro. And you can totally be a perfectionist about it and measure from top to bottom and see, but I am not that anal about it. I'm just gonna stick it on here, do it the same way, stick the Velcro together, and unwrap the back. Sort of hover over it just to see where I want this to lay, and then lay it down on top and press. And I will actually take my iron and press even more to melt that glue down and make sure that it sticks well. And we have a coat. Super simple project, really easy to whip up, doesn't take long to make. I think each one takes me about 45 minutes, which is no problem at all, and especially now that I have a whole bunch cut, I can just whip them through the machine and it's no big deal. Just make sure to slip stitch the back. I've actually not done that yet because I'm lazy, but I will do that once I have them all pulled together, so I can just sort of sit on the sofa and sew. I am going to leave basic measurements for Spanish Greyhounds in the description, just in case you feel that it would be a good project for you to sort of learn on, but you still want to sort of help out, because I'm actually making a bunch of these to send over to Spain for Spanish Greyhounds called Galgos. They don't have undercoats, and it gets really cold in Spain in the winter, so I'm sending a bunch of these over there so that the poor babies don't freeze to death. Feel free to leave any comments, questions, concerns in the comments below. I'm not a professional by any stretch. I've only been sewing for about a month now, but I will be happy to answer any questions at all that you might have, or help you find the answer if I don't know it myself. Thank you so much for joining me for this project. I hope you learned a little bit. Talk soon.